I never thought that trimming roses on a Thursday morning would end with my own son trespassing on my peace and dignity. I was in my gloves, knees on the dirt, trimming back the lavender when I heard heels clicking across my flagstone path. I looked up and there they were, Taryn and Maria, sweeping in like they owned the place. Maria's perfume hit me before her voice did. Floral, sharp, too much. "This garden is perfect for our wedding," she said. She didn't ask, she announced, like a queen staking claim to her new kingdom. Taryn barely looked at me. He walked straight to the arbor where his father had planted climbing roses 20 years ago and said, "We'll put the altar here, and the chairs can line the path." They were halfway through planning the entire ceremony before I'd even stood up. No hug, no, "Hi, Mom," just assumptions wrapped in entitlement. I stayed quiet. That old habit of silence, that shrinking instinct I'd developed after years of biting my tongue around Maria, came roaring back. I hate that I still do that. Maria turned and smiled at me then, wide and fake. "Don't worry, we'll keep it classy, rustic chic, right? And you'll just sit quietly on the porch and enjoy." I nodded. I nodded like a coward. I watched them walk around my home, my sanctuary, pointing and deciding like it was some Airbnb they had booked. Maria snapped a picture of the trellis with her phone. "We'll tell the florist to go with ivory and sage. Oh, and no shoes on the lawn. This moss is adorable." It wasn't moss. It was years of hard-earned shade gardening. But sure, adorable. They walked back to their car with their usual whirlwind of expensive sunglasses and clipped goodbyes. "We'll email you the vendor list," Taryn said. "Not ask about it, not talk about it. Email me a list like I was the venue manager." I stood there in my dirt-streaked gloves and watched them drive off like nothing had just happened, like I wasn't standing in the ruins of what was supposed to be a mother's pride, a son's respect. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. But I knew something had shifted. Not bent. Broken. The part of me that made excuses for their absence. That made peace with being forgotten. That part cracked in half, and in that silence, something new slipped in. Not rage. Not grief. Purpose. It had been 6 years since I'd last seen either of them. 6 years of unanswered calls, unopened birthday cards, and Christmas mornings spent alone with the same dusty decorations I once put up for Taryn when he was little. They hadn't come when his father died. Not to the hospital, not to the funeral, not even a phone call. I sat alone in the chapel that day, clutching my husband's watch in my hand like it was the only piece of warmth left. They sent flowers. A generic bouquet from a same-day delivery app. 6 years, and now they show up with wedding plans and matching sunglasses. The last time I'd heard Taryn's voice was on my birthday 3 years ago. A voicemail. He'd called a day late, said he was slammed with work, and ended with, "Love ya, Mom," like it was an afterthought he tacked on so he could sleep at night. Maria never even pretended. Not after the engagement. I wasn't good enough for her image, her lifestyle, her carefully edited social media life. She once said I smelled like paperbacks and stew. That was the last family dinner I was invited to. I remember laughing it off, the way women my age are taught to do. Like it's our job to be good-humored about being humiliated in our own homes. So yes, it had been 6 years. And it only took one glance around my garden for me to realize why they were suddenly back. Maria didn't compliment the roses. She complimented the lighting. Taryn didn't hug me. He stepped over my rake and said, "We can use this space for catering." They didn't come home, they came shopping. And I was just the old woman standing in the middle of her own property, being measured for convenience. It's funny what comes into focus when people treat you like furniture. I'd spent years justifying their distance, telling myself they were busy, that young people forget, that they'd come around. But they didn't forget me. They erased me, until I had something they wanted. Now suddenly I'm Mom, again. Now I'm so lucky to be part of their special day. They saw usefulness, but they never once saw me. That night, I sat in my living room with the porch light off, staring out at the garden. The same garden Taryn used to run through barefoot when he was 5. The one his father built trellis by trellis. The one Maria now wanted to rebrand rustic chic. They came back for this place, not for me, and I was done pretending otherwise. They'd always been like this, I just hadn't wanted to see it. The signs were there, long before they disappeared, before the silence, before the wedding plans, back when they still showed up, if only to remind me who I wasn't. Maria had this talent, an Olympic-level ability to insult you with a compliment. Once, after I spent 3 days cooking for Taryn's birthday, she walked through the kitchen, sniffed the air, and said, "Wow, it smells like a soup kitchen in here." Taryn laughed, not nervously, not in that uncomfortable way a decent man might when someone insults his mother. He laughed like it was a joke they shared. "Ma, you know Maria, she just says whatever she's thinking." No apology, no defense, just another brush-off wrapped in a chuckle. They've been chipping at me for years. "You should really update this place." "You still use a landline? Why don't you just sell and move to a condo or something?" Always with the undercurrent of shame that I wasn't shiny enough, young enough, modern enough to belong in their world. But I stayed quiet, because silence is what mothers are taught to do when we want to keep the peace. I told myself it wasn't worth starting a fight over a tone of voice or a dismissive glance. Until last Tuesday, I was sorting mail, bills, a coupon book, and an old credit card statement I hadn't looked at in months. I opened it by habit, not really thinking. That's when I saw the charge. $3, 287.55, Elegant Petal Events. Deposit. A florist. Not mine. I haven't hosted a party in years. But the date matched. The city matched. And the account? It was still tied to the emergency card I kept open in both our names. For medical reasons, Taryn had once insisted years ago. I stared at the number like it might rearrange itself into something less disgusting. They didn't ask. They didn't warn me. They just used me. Again. I called the florist. My voice shook, but I stayed calm. "Yes, I'd like to confirm a deposit made on the 14th of this month, under the name Maria Donnelly, addressed to," my address, my name. Maria had booked the florist using my card and listed my home as the event venue. She hadn't just assumed, she'd planned. That was the moment the air went still inside me. I wasn't a mother anymore, not to them. I was a resource, a free location, an old woman with a garden and a credit line. And something broke so quietly in my chest, I almost missed it. But I didn't cry. I opened a drawer, and I pulled out the old file, the one labeled Community Wedding Project. I didn't waste time crying anymore. I opened the file marked Community Wedding Project, the one my late husband and I started 20 years ago, back when we thought we could do something good with this garden. We had a dream once, he and I. Let couples who couldn't afford a church get married here, under the arbor we built by hand. He even made the benches himself, treated every board. We only hosted 3 weddings before his illness swept everything away, but I still had the file. Contacts, vendors, permit notes, a few old Polaroids of blushing brides in borrowed gowns. One couple, a waitress and a dishwasher, wrote us a Christmas card every year for 15 years. It had all sat untouched in the bottom drawer of my desk until Maria lit a match under me. They thought I was just some feeble old woman, clipping roses, waiting to die. But I've organized fundraisers that made the local news. I ran point for the church's soup kitchen for 10 years, handled the food drives, the holiday concerts, the city permits. I've dealt with permits that would make most people curl up and cry. I still have the muscle. And now, I had a mission. They weren't going to use this garden for performance, but I would use it for something meaningful. I sat down at my desk, put on my reading glasses, and started making a list. Step 1, call Carol. She picked up on the second ring. "Carol, it's me. I need your help." I explained everything. The uninvited takeover, the florist charge, the wedding plans made behind my back. There was a pause on the other end, then a soft laugh. "Oh, honey," she said, "let's give your garden back to people who actually deserve it." By sundown, we had a plan. We would turn their selfish spectacle into something better, a real wedding. Or rather, several weddings. Carol would help me reach out to couples in need, From our parish list, from the neighborhood, from the old records I still had. We'd keep the date, keep the arbor, keep the catering slot, but the guest list, the names spoken at the altar, those would change. They forgot me for 6 years, used me when it suited them, lied and stole like it was nothing. But this time, I wouldn't stay silent. This time, the mother they forgot was going to take her garden back. I slept better that night than I had in years. No more rehearsing what I'd say to Taryn. No more imagining Maria rolling her eyes at my curtains, my cooking, my everything. I wasn't spiraling anymore. I was planning. And the plan was simple. They wanted a picture-perfect wedding in the garden they ignored for years. They wanted white chairs and Pinterest lighting and to pose beside the roses his father planted. They wanted applause, gratitude, a show. They wanted my silence as the backdrop to their spotlight. But what they were going to get was something far more fitting. They were going to watch strangers walk down their aisle. They were going to witness vows they didn't write, flowers they didn't pick, and joy they couldn't fake. And they were going to watch it all happen from the outside, like I had for the past 6 years. I would not scream. I wouldn't destroy. No, this would be clean, precise, beautiful, a gift, because when people forget you, treat you like a prop in their performance, the worst thing you can do isn't yell or beg. It's show them who you are without them. That garden? It was never about status. Not to me. It was a dream. A place built for real love. Not Instagram captions. I just forgot that for a while. I forgot me. But now I remembered. And they were going to remember too, whether they liked it or not. This wasn't just a lesson. It was justice. Taryn and Maria had taken my name, my space, my resources, to build a day they thought they deserved. But they forgot that love is earned, that family is chosen, that not every woman over 60 is too fragile or too stupid to fight back. So I chose my gift carefully. Weddings. Weddings for people who had no altars, no backup plans, no luxury planners. Weddings for people who actually valued the sacredness of a vow. Maria thought she'd use me for her dream day. Taryn thought I'd stay quiet. They would both learn. There is no rage like the kind you can fold into linen napkins and lace veils. I was going to give them a wedding all right, just not theirs. The call came at 10:42 a.m. Tuesday morning. "Hi, this is Evan with Willow and Time Catering," the voice said, all bright and professional. "Just wanted to confirm which card to run the final deposit on. We have one on file ending in 1198 and another under a Taryn Donnelly." My heart didn't race. Not this time. I was ready. "Oh, hello, Evan?" I said, calmly sipping my tea. "Yes, I see the confusion. That first card is mine." A pause on the line. "I see," he said. "So, should we continue with the Donnelly head count and menu selections?" "No," I said, folding my napkin slowly. "Please hold the date, but the guests will be different." Another pause. "I'm sorry, different?" "Yes," I said, setting my tea down. "The event is still taking place here, on that date, but it will no longer be for Taryn Donnelly and Maria Santiago. You'll receive a revised guest list and menu shortly. Thank you for calling." I heard the flick of pen to paper as he scrambled to keep up. I smiled. This was the first breadcrumb, the first quiet signal that the story was changing, that this little narrative Maria had wrapped herself in like tulle was unraveling, thread by thread. And it would all seem so subtle at first. A catering switch, a missing RSVP list, a florist call redirected, vendors hesitating, unsure where the decisions were really coming from. They'd feel it, the slipping control, the invisible resistance. They'd ask themselves, did we forget to confirm something? Did we miscommunicate? Is she interfering? No, not interfering, reclaiming. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cancel anything. I didn't confront. I simply redirected. They'd built a wedding on top of my name, my home, and my silence. I wasn't removing the structure. I was replacing the soul of it. The arbor would stay. The chairs would stay. The music would still play at dusk. But the names being spoken, The vows exchanged, the tears shed, those would belong to people whose love wasn't built on entitlement. I hung up the phone and picked up my pen. There was work to do. I sat down with my old Rolodex and a fresh notepad, just like I used to before church galas or winter coat drives. It felt good, muscle memory good, like I'd finally picked up the thread of a life I'd let slip away while waiting for scraps from people who barely saw me. First call was to the parish office. "Sister Donna," I said, "do you still keep that list of couples looking for assistance with wedding costs? I think it's time we brought the garden back." There was silence, then a choked sound. She'd started crying. "Oh, Dorothy, yes. Yes, we do. We have quite a few, actually." By the end of the day, I'd spoken to 6 couples, told them what I was offering: a garden, an altar, chairs, flowers, cake, a warm community, free of charge. And by the end of the week, 3 had said yes, with trembling voices and tears in their eyes. A nurse and a mechanic. They'd been trying to save for a courthouse wedding after their landlord hiked the rent. She worked nights, he worked weekends. They hadn't had a single day off together in 3 months. 2 high school sweethearts, the kind that made you believe in forever. They'd been together 11 years and had a toddler who called them both Mama. No family support, just each other. A pair of immigrants, newly engaged, no relatives within 2,000 miles. She cried the hardest, said her mother would have loved to see her married in a garden. Said this would bring her close to her again. Each time they said yes, I wrote their names down in careful cursive, under the heading, Real Weddings. I didn't need to shout, "Look what I'm doing." I didn't need a single soul to validate me. Because these couples, they weren't calling me a burden. They weren't mocking my wallpaper or dismissing my garden as quaint. They weren't pretending I was invisible unless I had something they wanted. They cried. They thanked me. And most of all, they saw me. My hands worked like they hadn't in years, booking music, confirming floral donations, calling in favors from old vendors who still remembered Mrs. Donnelly, the fundraiser queen. I wasn't plotting revenge anymore. I was building something beautiful, something rooted. And while Taryn and Maria were off curating hashtags for a wedding they hadn't earned, I was helping 3 couples step into a kind of joy they had. Not everything about getting older is loss. Sometimes it's finally knowing how to use what they always took for granted. They came back on a Thursday afternoon without calling. I was out in the garden again, checking measurements for the arch draping. I heard the car doors slam first, then voices, laughter. I turned, and there they were. Maria stepped out in wedge heels and white linen like she was starring in a perfume ad. Taryn followed behind her, balancing 2 oversized boxes. Both were smiling, relaxed, as if they'd done something thoughtful. "I told you she'd be out here," Maria said brightly. "She's always out here." She brushed past me like I was a hedge. Taryn grunted under the weight of the boxes and set them on my porch. "Just dropping some stuff off for the decorator." My lips parted, but no sound came out at first. I looked at the boxes. One was labeled centerpieces, the other welcome table. "I don't remember saying yes to that," I said evenly. Maria turned toward me, eyebrows raised like I'd just asked her to define the word yes. "Oh, don't worry," she cooed. "You won't have to lift a finger. We have people coming for setup next week." My voice sharpened. "Maria, this is still my home." Her smile didn't falter, not even a millimeter. "Of course, Dorothy. You'll be right here on the porch, watching it all. It'll be so special for you. Full circle, you know? Your only son getting married in the garden he grew up in." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she was allowing me to witness her latest performance. And Taryn? He didn't look at me. He was already on his phone, thumbing through emails, maybe ordering more things with a card that might still be mine. They were acting like this was a formality, like I was the antique teapot sitting in the background of their curated life, quaint, harmless. "Don't stress," Maria added sweetly. "We'll handle everything. You just sit quietly and enjoy it." Sit quietly. I looked down at my hands, the ones that had just finished arranging rental chairs for 3 couples who actually loved each other. I looked up again and smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just deeply. You'll want to make sure everything's confirmed, I said calmly. You wouldn't want any last-minute surprises. Oh, it's all under control, Maria beamed. She patted my arm like I was a sweet old woman on the edge of a rocking chair, and then they walked inside my house like they'd never left. I didn't stop them. I didn't need to. They were so sure they had me boxed in. They forgot who taught them how to set a table and how to flip it. It started with a phone call from an unfamiliar number. Hi, is this Dorothy Donnelly? I almost hung up. The voice was perky in that sales representative way. But something made me stay on the line. This is Hannah from Bell and Briar Bridal. Just confirming payment for the gown alterations? We have you listed as the mother of the groom and we're waiting on the balance. I blinked. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't. The final alterations for Maria Santiago's gown were logged under your account. She noted you'd be covering the balance as part of the wedding budget. I gripped the counter. How much? Just under $640. She asked for rush service. Of course she did. I thanked the girl and hung up without giving a card. 5 minutes later, I was online, digging. The wedding website they'd built, and yes, they had built one, was an over-designed mess of white script on beige. Taryn and Maria's Forever Begins Here. Beneath that, my home address. Venue, garden ceremony at the groom's family estate. Family estate. That would have made my late husband laugh until he coughed. There were RSVP links, hotel suggestions, even a section called How You Can Help Make Our Day Special. Under that, a registry of luxury items and a note that read, in lieu of traditional gifts, please consider contributing to our wedding fund to help cover expenses. Dorothy Donnelly has graciously supported this dream. Join her in making it happen. Graciously. I read it twice, then a third time, like it might turn into something less revolting. It didn't. They had turned me into a sponsor. Like I was the smiling widow underwriting a theater production. Except I hadn't bought a ticket, and I sure as hell wasn't clapping. I started printing things, screenshots, invoices, vendor emails. I pulled every statement from that old joint credit card, the one I should have shut down years ago but didn't, because just in case made me soft. Maria had used it 6 times. Catering consults, the dress boutique, a custom wax seal kit for God's sake. And Taryn? He hadn't spent a dime, not of his own, but he'd used my name for every booking. Because they knew they could. Because I'd never said no loud enough before. I laid out the pages across the kitchen table. Receipts, addresses, quotes, registry links, evidence. They'd built their entire dream day on a lie. My lie, technically. The lie that I was still the woman they could use. But I wasn't. Not anymore. And if they thought this trail of receipts led to a wedding aisle, they were right. Just not theirs. Carol showed up on my porch holding a manila folder and 2 coffees. She looked pale under her sun hat, and she didn't bother with pleasantries. You need to sit down, she said. We sat at the old table under the wisteria. The vines were just starting to bloom, small lavender buds pushing through. Spring doesn't wait for anyone's permission, neither do betrayals. She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. I was helping the community center sort through small business loan applications, she said, sliding one toward me. And this came across my desk. I recognized your name immediately. It was a loan contract, a short-term event loan from a lender I'd never heard of, $10,000. Approved, co-signed by me, except I hadn't signed a thing. My mouth went dry. Carol, she nodded. Maria used your full legal name. Listed herself as a joint applicant. Forged your signature. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. Collateral? I asked. Carol hesitated. Your property. I felt the blood drain from my face. They listed your home address as the event venue. and promised it would increase the market value temporarily. The loan officer flagged it as low risk, assuming you were hosting the wedding willingly. She pulled out another document, the venue clause, with a tiny paragraph stating that the borrower would have full access to the site for setup, execution, and cleanup, and that the co-signer, me, agreed to those terms. "They forged your consent," she said softly, "and used your house as collateral." I sat there, silent, while the garden swayed around us like it didn't know what had just happened. Fraud. Not some mistake, not a mix-up, not even a selfish assumption. Fraud. Maria had crossed a legal line. Taryn either helped or watched. Either way, he was in it. Carol reached over and placed a hand on mine. "I know a lawyer. Someone from the church board. He handles this kind of thing." I nodded, but I didn't move. I couldn't. It wasn't the money that hit me. It was the signature. The casual, confident way she'd written my name like it was hers to use. I looked at the copy of her handwriting, looped and sharp, the same hand that patted my arm 2 days ago and told me to just sit quietly. They didn't just want my garden. They wanted my identity. And they thought I was too old, too slow, too blind to stop them. They were wrong. Now I had something more powerful than hurt feelings. I had evidence. I opened the windows that morning. The breeze came in soft and steady, carrying the scent of rosemary and wisteria through the kitchen. I made coffee, sliced a peach, and turned on the radio like it was any other Tuesday. Then I sat down and began sealing envelopes. The guest list wasn't long, but it was precise. 3 couples, their parents, their siblings, a few church friends who'd helped build the arbor, a handful of neighbors who'd watered my garden while I was recovering from knee surgery last spring, and 3 journalists. Not the big networks. Just local writers, the kind who still cared about things like handmade veils and borrowed shoes. One of them had written a story last year about a teen who saved up to buy his sister a prom dress. The other 2 specialized in human interest, people who cry with you, not at you. I made the call myself. "Hi, I have a story I think you'll want to hear," I said. "It involves a garden, 3 weddings, and a twist I promise you won't see coming." They all said yes. The invitations weren't flashy, just simple cardstock with embossed edges. I had a stash from the community center's donation bin. Carol helped me print the names. We used gold ink. Each one read, "You are warmly invited to join us for a celebration of real love. 3 weddings, 1 garden, no cost, because everyone deserves a beginning. Date, time, address, all matching the one Maria had put on her fraudulent website. Let her think she'd successfully locked it in. Let her think all her little lies were holding. She had no idea the flowers were already ordered. No idea the chairs had been reassigned. No idea the music playlist now included Here Comes the Sun for a bride named Alana who'd crossed 2 borders just to fall in love. Maria thought she was throwing a wedding. What she'd actually done was fund 3 of them and leave a paper trail behind. The irony was almost too perfect. Every time she smiled while charging something to my name, she was paying for someone else's happiness. That's the kind of justice I believe in, not bitterness, redirection. I sealed the last envelope, pressed a gold sticker to the flap, and set them in a tidy stack by the door. Let them walk into their big day expecting spotlight. Let them arrive in white, expecting applause. What they'd get instead was truth, and a front row seat to it. The morning of the wedding was clear and golden. I woke early, not out of nerves, but readiness, the kind of steadiness that comes when you've already felt the worst and chosen what to do with it. By 8, Carol was arranging flowers near the arbor, humming under her breath. The music team arrived with soft jazz and folding speakers. The chairs, every last one of them, had been set up in neat rows, trimmed with white ribbon from the church basement. By 9, the first couple arrived, hand in hand, tearful, beaming, and by 10, my garden was alive. Children ran across the lawn with fistfuls of petals. The mechanic groom shook hands with the pastor. Elena, the young bride with no family, gripped my hands and said, "Thank you. I've never felt this scene in my life. I just smiled and told her, "You deserve this." At 10:32, the gate creaked open again. Taryn stepped through first, adjusting his cufflinks, eyes scanning the scene with a tight-lipped grin. Maria followed behind him in white, a fitted mermaid gown, full makeup, veil clipped just so. She was holding a small bouquet, already posing. Then they saw the crowd and stopped. The music didn't stop for them. They looked around, eyes darting between unfamiliar faces, a group of bridesmaids in pale yellow, a boy tossing confetti at his grandmother's shoes. Maria's smile faltered. "What?" Taryn turned to me, confusion turning into something darker. "Mom, what is this?" I stepped out from under the wisteria, calm, firm, not apologizing. "This is the wedding," I said. Maria blinked, eyes wide, voice pinched. "But who are these people?" Guests turned, some curious, some wary. A few, including the reporters, started to lift their phones. Carol stepped beside me, arms crossed. "These," I said, "are the couples who will be married here today." People who asked. People who were honest. Taryn's voice dropped an octave. "This isn't funny." "No," I agreed. "It's not." Maria looked like she'd swallowed vinegar. "You can't just hijack our wedding." I looked her dead in the eyes. "You used my name, my home, my money, without permission. That's not a wedding, Maria. That's a scam." She looked around again, saw the reporters, the cameras, the eyes, and for the first time since I met her, I saw fear, the real kind, the kind that comes when you realize you've lost control of the script. They arrived expecting applause, but this crowd wasn't clapping. They were watching. I let the moment breathe. The tension hovered in the garden like static, charged and waiting to land. The music had faded to background hum. The children stopped mid-play. Even the breeze felt still. I stepped onto the flagstone path in front of the arbor, past the rows of white chairs, the pastel bouquets, and the three couples holding hands with quiet grace. I turned toward the guests. "Some of you may be wondering what's happening," I said clearly, without trembling. "So let me be plain." I held up a cream folder, one of the very same Maria had likely never imagined I'd collect. "This is not the wedding of Taryn Donnelly and Maria Santiago. They do not have permission to use this property. They do not own the flowers, the food, or the seats you're sitting in. They used my name to obtain loans, book vendors, and secure services they never paid for." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked. A reporter stepped forward, notepad already moving. "They forged my signature," I continued, "put my house down as collateral, and used my credit card, the one I kept open for emergencies, to fund their dream day." A murmur spread. Journalists leaned in. Heads turned toward Taryn and Maria, who now stood pale and frozen under the arbor, like ghosts haunting a house they'd never built. "They did all this," I said, steady as stone, "without asking, without respecting, without even showing up to my life for 6 years until they needed something." I looked at Taryn then. He flinched. "And yet, today, this garden is full, not with their friends, not with stage smiles, but with real couples, real love, people who know what it means to earn joy, not steal it." I nodded to the first couple. She wiped her eyes and clutched her fiancé's hand tighter. Taryn took a step forward. "Mom, what are you doing?" I raised my voice just enough. "I'm telling the truth, out loud, in front of witnesses, and I'm taking back what's mine, not out of spite but out of principle." Maria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once, she had no script. I faced the guests one last time. This garden doesn't belong to lies, it belongs to love. And then I stepped aside. The pastor moved forward. The first bride approached the aisle, and the crowd, the real one, began to rise. The wedding had begun, and it had nothing to do with them. Maria's voice cut through the quiet, like a cracked violin. "You can't do this," she screeched, stepping toward me, heels wobbling in the grass. This is our day. I turned to her, slowly, without flinching. No, I said, my voice low and sure. It was never your day. Her mouth opened, but nothing coherent came out, just a choked, bitter sound. Taryn took a step forward, trying to recover. We can talk about this, he said, eyes darting around at the crowd, the cameras. There's no need to make a scene. I smiled, small and deliberate. Taryn, I didn't make the scene. You did, when you handed her my name like a party favor. A few gasps, one audible wow from the third row. Maria's hands balled into fists at her sides. This is insane. We invited people. We booked things. You can't just hijack our wedding. It's already done, I said, pulling a folded document from the folder, a printed copy of the police fraud report I filed 3 days ago, stamped and signed. The authorities are aware. This copy goes to the vendors after today's ceremony. The garden is legally mine. The charges are being reversed, and the loan has been flagged. Maria's face drained of color. And as for this garden, I continued, turning so my voice reached the guests again, it doesn't belong to thieves. It belongs to love. The officiant gave a single respectful nod, then turned to the first couple, the nurse and the mechanic. She held her bouquet with both hands, trembling. He squeezed her shoulder, and just like that, the music resumed, soft piano notes drifting over the roses. Maria stood frozen. Taryn looked like he wanted to melt through the flagstone. I didn't look back at them again, because they didn't matter now. The only people that mattered were the ones stepping forward in faith, the ones who didn't forge names or steal credit, the ones who just wanted a chance to say I do without shame. The officiant spoke clearly. We are gathered here today to celebrate not one, but 3 unions of love that has endured, grown, and asked for nothing but a place to bloom. As the first bride began her walk down the aisle, people rose to their feet. Applause broke out, but not for Maria, not for Taryn, for the kind of joy you can't fake and the kind of justice that doesn't need to shout. I didn't watch them fall apart, not directly. I was focused on the couple in front of the arbor, hands trembling as they faced each other with wide, wet eyes. The bride's voice cracked as she said her vows. The groom mouthed, "It's okay," as he steadied her hands. But from the corner of my eye, I saw it begin. A ripple, a shift in the air, in the posture of the guests. People turned their backs on Taryn and Maria, some politely, others coldly. A few older women shook their heads in quiet disgust. Someone near the last row let out a laugh, sharp, awkward, trying to make light of what everyone had just seen. Maria stood stiff in her ivory dress, fists still clenched. She kept blinking like the world was refusing to make sense, like the story she'd written in her head couldn't possibly be ending like this. Taryn muttered something under his breath. She hissed back. And then, the crack! Maria burst into tears. Loud, messy, real ones. Makeup running down her cheeks, gasps raking through her chest. She looked at the crowd, like someone would still step in, still rescue her, still hand her back the spotlight. No one did. Taryn grabbed her arm and tried to shush her, but she yanked away. "Don't touch me," she screamed, mascara streaked and feral. He muttered, "Let's just go." She didn't argue. Maria gathered her skirt in a bunch and stomped down the aisle she never owned, dragging her heels through the petals meant for someone else. Taryn followed behind, jaw tight, avoiding every gaze. They left the way they arrived, entitled, unprepared, empty. The back gate slammed. Silence followed, not tense, not shocked, but relieved. And then, as if nothing had happened at all, the ceremony continued. The second couple stood. Friends patted shoulders. The jazz band shifted into a soft, instrumental version of At Last. I looked around at the people in the garden, families leaning together, neighbors tearing up, children twirling ribbons in the sun, and I thought, this is what they tried to steal. Not a garden, not a house, but meaning. They wanted to turn a sacred place into a photo shoot. And instead, they got an exit no one would ever forget. For all the wrong reasons. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just breathed in the scent of rosewater and summer air and watched love bloom where deceit had withered. The garden is quiet now. Petals still cling to the grass. A bit of ribbon flutters on the back fence, forgotten. The arbor stands tall under the late summer sun, its flowers just starting to wilt at the edges, but beautifully so. The last couple left an hour ago, hand in hand, cheeks still red from all the laughing and crying. Their parents hugged me. One of the grooms called me Mama Donnelly without thinking. And I let him, because it didn't ache. Not anymore. The weddings were done. All 3 of them. Joy poured into the garden like honey over the last 2 days. There was dancing, vows, tears, a toddler who wouldn't stop picking dandelions and handing them to every bride he saw. I lost count of how many hands I held, how many times I heard someone whisper, "Thank you." I didn't stand at the center of anything, but I didn't sit on the sidelines either. I was right where I needed to be, present, whole, seen. As dusk settled, I turned on the fairy lights strung across the fence line. The bulbs glowed warm against the lavender sky, soft and forgiving. Carol brought me a folding chair and a glass of sweet tea. We sat side by side, listening to the wind rustle the leaves. Neither of us mentioned Taryn or Maria. They were gone. For now. Maybe for good. I'd mailed the letter back without a stamp. If he wants to see what I said, he'll have to come get it. And if he does, I'll be here. But I won't be waiting. That's the difference now. I used to measure my days by how long it had been since he called. I used to replay the moments I might have messed up. I used to shrink myself just enough to still fit in their lives. Now I count chairs. I count candles burned and tears shed. The good kind, the kind that waters something real. I count couples. 3 of them. 3 more than I ever thought this garden would hold again. My late husband would have been proud. He would have poured the wine, played the music too loud, and cried during every set of vows. He'd say, "Dorothy, look what you did." And I'd say, "No, look what we gave." Because that's what this was. Not revenge, redemption. The garden doesn't wait for apologies. It just grows. And so do I. The fallout came fast. By Monday, the bank called me directly. A supervisor, professional, apologetic, nervous, confirmed what I already knew. The wedding loan had been terminated. Fraud report verified. Funds frozen. Collateral nullified. My house, officially untangled from their mess. "We take forged co-signatures seriously," she said, voice tight with embarrassment. "You won't be held liable." Good. 2 days later, the florist called. "We're backing out of the Donnelly Santiago account. Word got around after Saturday. No one wants to be associated with that kind of deceit." Same with the cake decorator, the rental service, the boutique. They'd poisoned their own plans, and now the doors were quietly closing around them. Even the photographer, one of Maria's prized aesthetic geniuses, pulled out, said he didn't work with unstable narratives. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't need to. By Thursday, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten, sloppy, familiar. It was from Taryn. No return address. Just my name, underlined twice, like he was daring me not to open it. Inside was a letter 5 pages of resentment, written in that frantic, self-justifying scrawl he used to get when he was 12 and caught lying. He accused me of sabotaging him, said I'd humiliated Maria publicly, that I'd made a spectacle out of something sacred, as if they hadn't been the ones to cheapen it in the first place. There was no apology, just blame, just anger. Not once did he mention the forged documents, the stolen money, the silence that stretched across 6 years. He ended it with, "You ruined the most important day of my life." I didn't hesitate. I turned the letter over, grabbed a pen, and wrote 3 words in steady print. That's the problem. I sealed it. No greeting, no signature, no softness. Because he was right. I had ruined something, not a wedding, a performance. a fantasy built on lies, greed, and entitlement. And I'd ruined it by refusing to play my part. That wasn't cruelty. That was clarity. I didn't send the letter right away. I left it on the corner of my desk for a few days, staring at those 3 words whenever I walked past. They held everything I needed to say, not just to him, but to myself. That's the problem. The way I'd let love excuse everything, the way I'd kept quiet to keep the peace, the way I'd let myself be erased in my own story. Not anymore.